You are my carousel that keeps evolving. Our hands out, feeling free. Our hearts on a wire, swinging with a song, playing in our minds. We just keep spinning, letting go of old dust, watching it blow away in slow motion around us, like a vintage violin after the music plays. Love settles on the leaves, on the memories we bleed. It surrounds us with dew in another time and space. Our hearts race in the air, moments we can't replace. Then we fly like the birds, our wings held back, with both sorrow and joy, soaring to new winters, building our invisible nest as we turn with time.
I remember Christopher Robin when helping Pooh find honey was my biggest problem. I remember the blustery days, how we trusted each other in every way. I remember when we helped Eeyore find his way home from the seashore and everything was good in the 100-acre woods. I remember Curious George. I had to chase him 100 miles as soon as my mother kissed me goodnight. We went around the world, but we made it home before daylight, and everything was all right. And Sammy the Seal would let me get on his back and ride him for 1,000,000 miles. We exchanged halcyon smiles. I remember the monster who brought fear to the 100-acre woods, scarier than the heffalump, scarier than the thing with the black eyes. He was pure evil in disguise. He told lies. Filled with evil and guile, he was vile. Christopher Robin called him a pedophile. He tried to seduce me 10 minutes after my mother introduced me. I remember that ice-cold June when Mama said we're getting married soon, and Disney left the room. I remember when Larry Flint and Hugh Hefner moved in, and H.A. Ray moved away, and Dr. Seuss and Sid Hoff took the summer off. I remember seeing the doorknob turn. The pedophile kneeled on one knee, said he had a story he wanted to read to me. And Mother Goose turned her head. Christopher Robin fled. Curious George hid under the bed. And the 100-acre woods was filled with dread. I remember all of us gathering around the meeting in the 100-acre woods. Christopher Robin said if I ever opened up a pornographic magazine, I could be banned for good. I asked, what's a pornographic magazine? He said he didn't know what to say, but they were 10 times worse than a blustery day. But I was curious like George. I was curious like Curious George. I opened up the pornographic magazines. I remember the woman. I saw more of her insides than a doctor. I saw the dog on top of her, but I can't tell you what they did. And I cried out for Winnie the Pooh. I just wanted to be a kid. I remember the last time I saw Christopher Robin. Tears rolled down his chin. He asked me why I had to let the pedophile in. And it was a blustery day times 10. And I waved goodbye to Piglet and Roo to Tigger and the heffalump too. But mostly, I remember standing closely to Danny the dinosaur. He said he'll always love me, but I couldn't slide down his back no more. I remember 1974. I used it as a coping skill to survive a horrible childhood. And then I had to put the pieces together 30 years later as to why I rhyme so much. A lot of my poems I found out were about molestations. And I started writing poetry to protect women. And after 5 and 6 of those poems, I had to ask myself, why am I so obsessed with this molestation issue? And then it helped me to look back into my childhood. And a lot of these secrets were swept under the rug. So poetry in itself helped me to put my childhood back together. Originally, I wanted to be a journalist in writing, I didn't want to be a poet. One day I went to high school and a poem I had written had appeared in the LA Herald Examiner. So when I went to school, I didn't know it was published, but seemingly the rest of the world knew it was published. So a senator wrote me a letter, two senators, head of the school district for writing, and it was just, everybody was like, congratulations, congratulations. So at that moment, I was branded as a poet in high school, and it just fell on top of my head at that particular moment. I went to a university on a writing scholarship, University of Puget Sound, which was a predominantly white university, 99%. They had 8 black students in the entire university. I was accepted to the President's Honor Society. They asked me to read poetry. And when I went to read, they didn't want me to read about Frost or Hardy. They wanted me to read about urban poverty. And this was a dilemma. If there are no poor people here, why am I in a room full of rich men reading about black children stealing in poor neighborhoods? So I protested and I blew a lot of opportunities by not doing that. The reason I wrote the book, They Wouldn't Let Me Be White, is because we're taught one thing in high school, but when we get into the real world, it's a different door than we were prepared for. Literature is the most segregated part of our society, which means we're not talking to each other. You have two sides and a middle. So my role as a writer who's been accepted in both sides is to be able to communicate with both sides of people on the different sides of the spectrum. I took the poetry and I mixed it together, and I created an entirely different style of poetry, written with the technical elements of Frost, but with the urban side and the blues messages. So that is why I call my poetry prosody, which is a combination of poetry and prose. It has the elements of both. So this was me being defiant to a society that said I had to get rid of Robert Frost. And if you listen to my poetry, you will hear these elements of poetry within.
Sometimes I wish I were a bird, so I could swoop down to you. Maybe sit on your windowsill, just sit and sing a song or two, hoping you will know it is me in the way I sing that tune. The notes from a long time ago, when we sat under that moon. You would look over at me and think of all those times. Hear my voice inside the wind. Think of all those rhymes. One day when you are older and it seems you're all alone, I will swoop inside your window, bring love to your empty home.
No, as I said, I have Gina Nemo here with me in the studio.
Poetry was like comfort to me. You put something positive out there in the world and it just makes things better. So if everyone thought that way, just imagine how much better things would be. Like if everyone did something during the day for everyone else. Okay, so I started doing the poems actually just to basically put something positive out. And that was my gift. A lot of people read these poems and they tell me, I'm trying to get out of this dysfunction and come back to being myself. And that was what really breaking down meant. I'm trying to break down and get back to the core of who I am.
I never liked butterflies. They get to fly wherever they want. Free to be beautiful. No need to prove they are smart. They flutter their stained glass wings like a carnival in midair. Then they land without weight while they escape with all their color. Poetry is about finding your own truth. It's important when you write that you draw from your own life experiences and your own inspiration. I always come up with ideas when I meet people, when I'm in different places, when I'm traveling. Sometimes I can just be sitting somewhere and I just see something and I go, wow, I gotta write something about that. It's really important to find your own truth, and it's really important to start. And a lot of people just don't do that. I think a lot of people think they're not good enough. They compare themselves to people who aren't even around anymore. I think the world's changed a lot, and I think a lot of people have something to say about it. When a parent dies, it's like if you had rose-colored glasses on, they just disappear. You kind of see the world for what it is because someone's there and then they're gone. I was 8 when my mother died. I had to put on a brave face. I had to get through the pain, the sadness, the loneliness. The way I dealt with it was really through writing. I started writing poetry, I started writing music. It helped me cope with what I was dealing with. A lot of people don't realize that when a child loses a parent, they lose their childhood because they realize that life is never going to be the same. I know that a lot of kids who lose their parents when they're young, they decide to do it in a different way. And they go through a lot of struggles. And they've gotten into alcohol and drugs and all those things. I feel that if kids or people who experience this sort of thing knew that they could write about it, I think that they would get through a lot of the difficulties in life going on or moving on without a parent. My writing was really what took me through that. Poetry has been sort of therapy for me. Write about it. Things will just get better. She took her own life, not because she hated, because she loved too much. Her heart gave out when she crossed the street, that street. It reminded her of him, that lonely street. It disappeared in the fog. Only a dead end. So many broken dreams. She cried at the market. Out of nowhere, she just couldn't stop. Her frail hands reaching for one last cigarette. Her life was full of regret. Her paintings were not finished yet.
Am I a poet? It seems to me there are some missing pieces to complete this puzzle. Am I truly a poet of some kind or just an imposter? You will find me hiding between letters and words and elusive alliterations and the scribbles and riddles flowing from my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, my dreams, and sometimes I succeed and find a rhyme scheme, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm inspired by all these things that I see that come out of me on muse's wings and deemed to be called poetry by some. And sometimes it all comes together in the beginning, unravels in the middle, and then falls apart in an orgasmic ending, exploding and creating something new in this world. And it is then that it ends. And I lay down my pen, and I nod my head, and I answer my own question. Yes, I am a poet.
These are the ones that I have in mind when I have my stage to speak with my spirit ablaze with life, because we are cut from the same mad cloth and the same mad pattern and brought to this world for the same mad purpose, to bring truth to the forefront, to knock down society's walls and to free the flow of divinity from the hands of old, dying mediocrity. I actually found poetry through Mad Swirl. Before that, I'd written, as a teenager, writing poetry to girls, and through letter writing when I was in the service, did a lot of letter writing, and I found that I had a voice that I never necessarily thought of as being a poet's voice or even a writer's voice. I was always more of a visual artist. I painted and I drew, and I kind of thought that's what my talents were. Yeah. We started in 1999 just because we wanted to have something different, something that we hadn't seen before, and we had a voice and we had friends who had voices that we thought needed to be shared, and we created a platform that we wished was out there, and it was a print zine to begin with. We did a couple issues of that and distributed it to all of our close friends, and eventually it just kind of grew into the website. The website started gaining momentum, and then from there started doing the open mic about 10 years ago, and here we are now. I feel that the staff that we have, great poetry editor MH Clay, who is helping drive the poetry that's coming through us. The quality of poetry is just rising all the time. The poetry that I see performed on the stage that bar is just getting higher and higher, and that's where I want to see poetry. I want to see people keep pushing the bounds of poetry, the bounds of spoken word, of such an open outlet to so many people and so much to be said, and poets, you know, voices are speaking the truth, getting that out there in a way that's accessible to everybody. I have a lot of exposés in my poetry. I don't really hide. I kind of put it out there, you know, and sometimes it's sad, and sometimes it's patriotic, and sometimes it's angry. I mean, it just comes out. It's whatever mood I was in when I wrote it. I can't help but put myself into my poetry. It's who I am. It's a snapshot of what's in here. With Mad Swirl alone, I've seen numerous emails coming in from people introducing themselves as, I've never sent in poetry before, this is my first time submitting poetry. And then you read their poetry and you're like, you know, you're a great poet, and then we accept one of their poems, put it in our forum, they get energized, they submit another poem, really excited, really into it. You know, they get another one accepted. Next thing you know, a couple years down the road, these people are writing volumes, very prolific poets coming out of somebody who's never submitted poetry before. So you just gotta take the step. No one's gonna come knocking on your door asking if they can have any of your poetry. You gotta get it out there, you gotta get exposure, you gotta get people to read it.
I'm M.H. Clay, Johnny Olson's co-host for our open mic Mad Swirl every first Wednesday.
I've been an active member since almost the very beginning. I found it, and in the beginning it was like 8 of us doing poems over and over and over again.
Mad Swirl has become this great burgeoning community of creatives. To be in a venue where everybody's just really digging for everybody else, and it's not about trying to get your spot. It's really cool, and the collaborative things that happen are really amazing. Lots of free riffing poetry, lots of improvisational music.
The local thing has promulgated to the international level, where you guys are putting in Pakistani poets and Israeli poets and Nepalese poets.
It's one of the most open, receiving venues that I know of. Welcome to Mad Swirl. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
You're the one who's bending all these memories I'm remembering, picture perfect, and then that I tried to find.
Man, when they first came onto the stage, we used to be doing the open mic in the other part of the lounge.
Because I thought I was protecting America. I thought I was protecting you all from the enemy who was out there to get us because they hate us because of our freedoms, right, George? And I always in my mind, that woman and that man jumping out of the building, I couldn't take it.
Heaven, how high the moon, the darkest night would shine if you will come to me soon.
According to the quintessential strategy of transcending humanity's increasing mediocrity by joyously and drunkenly and wholly embracing this creative energy.
Of course, I thought about returning them, sending them back in a mailer or a small brown box. And I thought about washing them, though they weren't mine, and they weren't unclean, only unwashed. And they weren't sexy, only colorful. They were more colorful than all of my underpants put together.
My right testicle I call Marty McFly. My left one, Old Doc Brown. Really, we can go anywhere. My penis is a time machine.
Electric guitars of the Who drip molten sparks in windmill firework displays, splaying against bell-bottom feet on dark, mysterious roads to pinball machines and unfooled long-hair men.
I love Mad Swirl. I really do. It saves my life.
I love it.
There's poetry forums all over the internet, and it's so at everyone's fingertips, all the writers. You just got to put it out there, get your voice out there. Don't be afraid, because someone somewhere is going to dig what you're writing. They're going to hear your voice. You're going to help touch in them what's touched you, to be able to have you put that down on paper.
I have two fathers, a map of rivers, a red room, a brave dog, hands that fail me, a small knife, a small mouth, a small mother, a broken clay pot filled with small dead rabbits like apples, the felt full of ghosts, my throat full of bees. I'm Mishka Hussain and I'm 23. I started writing poetry when I was about 11. I would say, and I do have to account for this, I think, because it appears so much in my writing, that the sexual abuse I experienced when I was growing up, particularly age 12 and 13, they kind of were the catalyst for a lot of my work, especially a lot of my recent work. Poetry to me is many things. Primarily, I think it's the distillation of feeling to its most potent form. You know, you think of something like vodka or strong whiskey. I would say definitely that it happened in stages. It started at Interlochen Arts Academy, where I finished my high school. It was the first time in my life I felt allowed to be a child. It was more than just the poetry, and I mean, it's up in the middle of nowhere in the Michigan woods, you know, so you can imagine throwing together hormone-addled teenagers who also happen to be artists, you know, with a fine flair for good dialogue and the picturesque, and you can imagine the insanity that occurred, the absolute, you know, chaos. But it was magnificent, and there was a kind of expansion of the spirit, and a kind of allowing oneself to go feral and be young and potently, terrifyingly, exhilaratingly alive, being surrounded by beauty, you know, incredible beauty that was also produced by, you know, your best friend, by the person you were going out with, by you, you know. So over the years, and especially in the past few years, my poetry style has shifted dramatically. And so it was about cutting out everything that was superfluous, everything that was self-indulgent, you know, getting down to the raw essence of poetry. Before, it was this very sort of overblown, romantic, very dizzied adolescent sort of thing. And now there's something more honest, but also more ruthless about it, I think, which I quite like. How I learned history. Here is the truth. Most times all it is a name and a rag. The public bathroom's nurse's arms, the hand at my elbow. Most times all it is a hook and a smell. A series of small objects to count, then gather, pile and count again for as long as is needed. Most times there is a tear in the white paper, pictures smeared with ink, most times not much. A hook in the gut, raw skin of my wrist, the stillness at the chair, the names all received and held on the palm, many neat lines in a book, many numbers. This is history. To count up the dead and how, to open your hand, to take, however, as much, to take and take. Last, there are dreams that fill up my mouth with salt and the sea. There is white cloth that whines and whines. There is my hair, the body is veal. There is a small baby that cried for 9 years in the river weeds.
My beautiful dream, as sweet as your olive-colored skin, love me with every breath you take from me and give me back life. I'll sail the forbidden seas, brave the desert winds, float the murderous river with blood-soaked hands, and brave the guns of armies of the Byzantine. Conquer the tropical rains and weathered storms, to see you there alone, waiting for me at the sea, with your hair blowing so softly in the breeze. On top your white horse, eyes so intense and sharply staring, a French and Tunisian princess, glaring at me through the lands, drawing me closer, as I top the hills and mountains, through the villages with sand walls and blue doors and stone streets. My black beast rides the winds of the Sahara with knives and vultures at my back. Predators and thieves and villains stomp below his hooves into the sand. My dreams of kissing thee, lips made of flowers. My cracked hands hold tight to the reins, lips and tongue dry for months and days. I flew away, I fell to my knees. Barely I could see a silhouette against a long, forbidding beach. A rider in a flowing white headdress with her steed with plates of gold on his chest, snorting his hot breath into the cold of the Mediterranean and his staring eyes. Cracking the whip at full speed, a beautiful Tunisian sunset reaches out to me, hands rich with jewels, eyes shining like diamonds. Her smile kisses me. I sit alone on a stone in the shade of a palm tree. Against the peering of the blue waves, she cares for me and my wounds. And with a single touch of her thin, slight hand, beautiful and grand, I dream and I dream and I dream of my Arabian princess.
I started out playing bass guitar when I was about 16. I have to walk about 4 or 5 miles just carrying my bass and my amp just to practice with the drummer once a month. I hooked up with friends of mine that I knew for a long time on the Charlotte metal scene, a band called Black Ritual. I had to be part of that. Thrash metal, real heavy, hardcore kind of stuff. Playing small clubs and through the years built ourselves up to where we were one of the biggest metal bands in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, especially in Charlotte. Played at a place called Amos's South End. And within the first hour, they took out 2 or 3 people with broken ankles and arms in the ambulance. We had a lot of crazy times playing Baltimore, and nobody had cell phones back then. You know, you didn't have GPS, you had MapQuest, so we had to print it all out. Well, they sent us through East Baltimore, you know, about 8 o'clock in the morning. We drive through East Baltimore with the doors locked. Drummer's got his gun pulled out and cocked. Got out there, we finally found the bar. And, you know, we were a metal band, and, you know, we were all decked out, and the drummers all painted up back then, and we walk in, and there's a guy up on the stage with an acoustic singing like Jim Croce songs, you know, and we're like, oh my God, and there's like 2 people in there, and it's like a 9-hour drive from there. So we walk in, and, you know, the bartender's like, you know, he said, yeah, there's gonna be some people here tonight, you know, don't worry about it, you know, this and that. So we sat through the set, watched the guy, and, you know, the acoustic guy got done, and it's 2 or 3 of his friends left with him, and we were just sitting there like, you know, well, you know, what the hell are we gonna do now? And he's like, well, he said, you know, and he promised us $200, you know, over the phone. It wasn't a contract, but he said, I'll give you, all I can do is give you $20, you know, y'all can play, I'll give you $20, you know, and so we were like, nah, fuck that, you know, we're not taking all our equipment out, and, you know, just to play for you. So we ended up not even playing. We went outside, was hanging out on the sidewalk, and all these people were going into the tattoo parlor, you know, because it was like a Saturday night. We were telling them our story. They were giving us $20 bills, $10 bills, you know, just for enough gas to get back home. So we ended up just going back to the hotel room and drinking beer. That was about it. Drove back home the next day. That was my first experience on the road. By the time I was in Black Ritual, it got a lot better than that. We opened up for some national bands. I didn't even, you know, really care about the girls as much, you know, because by the time we were always headlining, by the time we got up, you know, and done playing, they done kicked everybody out of the bar. The girls were drunk and gone anyway. Sex and drugs and partying at the band room, and, you know, and it's actually a lot of work and takes you away from your family. Those times I've been spending time with my kids. They missed out on me a lot, you know, during that time, and the wild times partying out, you know, gone for the weekend. And I had a pretty good reputation as being pretty wild. With drinking, it was to the point to where people really didn't know me as who I was as a person. You know, every time they see me, they had this story. Well, I remember when you jumped off the stage, you know, 3 years ago, you jumped off the stage and knocked your amp off, or you were drunk at this show, or, you know, you were being crazy at that show. And I started writing poetry, trying to keep girls, to make them want to stay and be like, man, this guy's for real. And of course it didn't work, because they were party girls. They, you know, they wanted to be where the next band was, or the next guy was, and this and that. The band broke up, and after about 7 years, it hit me really hard. You don't have the people. You don't have the partying, you don't have the shows, and the people wanting to come up and talk to you, the people wanting to meet you, you know, and the people wanting to take pictures with you. You know, I was sitting at home by myself Tuesday night, Wednesday night, I had band practice. What do I do now? I started drinking and drinking and drinking, you know, because when you drink and trying to kill the boredom, you know, and you want that time, you need that clock to keep going and keep going. It's gonna take you down, especially if you're older. You know, your body can only handle so much, so I had to slow down with help from my children. I just started writing about drinking and kind of explained to myself, you know, what was going on. People kept telling me, man, you have this really, really great ability to put somebody right there, you know, in the poem with you or the story. You know, this great imagery, you know, and people kept telling me that, so I fed off that, and I was like, well, how can I make people see something without them even being there? It's either a love poem for a pretty girl, you know, that I'm either, you know, and I'm not gonna say I ain't trying to impress her, because the poets do that. You know, that's what poets do. They write poems for girls because they like them, have crushes on them, you know, and they try to get their attention. And I would try to explain their eyes, the color of their eyes to them in a way that they had never heard before. It was either that, and then I loved to write a, you know, a fantasy, the ravens and the wolves and the, you know, the end of the world. And my youngest son come and stayed with me, and he brought his acoustic guitar. He's like, hey Dad, you know, check out the song. And he's an amazing guitar player. So I started reading the poem, and he was like, oh, I really like that, you know, and we was kind of doing it, and it actually happened like that. By the end of the night, we had 9 songs written. I just thought in my head, I said, this is something different, this works. I'm not hiding behind the bass guitar, jumping around, swinging it around, you know, being drunk and crazy. We got this party, we put it on the internet and everything, and you know, 50 people show up. We got a keg of beer, we get lawn chairs out there, summertime, and we had the candles and, you know, the Christmas lights strung out around. So we went into our first song, and I looked at James, I'm like, are you ready? He said, yeah, let's do this. And he's sitting down, I was standing up, and we went to that first song, and every single person in that yard stood up and just started screaming. Woo! You know, and I was just like, wow, I'd never, you know, felt nothing like that in my life. I mean, I had, as a group, you know, when you're at a concert, you know, or you're in a band and everybody's doing it, but it was like, they were like, you know, right at me, you know, and him. I looked down at him, and he was just shaking, you know, and he looked at me, and I was just shaking like this. So I think that's kind of how the whole poetry and music thing started.
I was born in Santa Ana, El Salvador. I had a lot of family there who supported me, especially when my mom wasn't there. We lived in a big house, but it was so beat up and old, and we didn't even have a roof. On the outside, we had trees, we had papayas. I had a pet chicken or rooster named Emilio. I didn't have a lot in El Salvador except just whatever my family gave me, and their love was enough. With love also came the realities of family members, you know, like one of my uncles being a drunk. He would get beat by my uncle, and my uncle was obviously his dad, but he looked like he was 26 years old. It's weird now imagine a 50-year-old dad beating a 27-year-old, a 26-year-old with the belt. I mean, that's just how we were. We're a family. Like, no matter how drunk he would get, no matter how pissed off my uncle was, he still kept him in that house. I had a lot of friends. Most of my friends were just children. But I had this one cat, we call him Chacal, because Chacal was always a troublemaker. And unfortunately, you know, I wrote in one of my poems that, you know, I used to hang out with murderers. That was him, you know. He was, one day I came to his house where his mom was at, because he had just killed one of the kids. As much as I've seen so much, I can't blame the things that my friends did, because their lifestyle was just, it was, you know, they didn't have shit. You know, you can't tell anybody that doesn't have shit, you know what I mean, to make something of yourself. I mean, obviously there's no excuse in life, but come on, there's people that they don't think like us, you know, and they don't have what we have. And like I said, all I knew is I had family, and it's sad because most of my family members, like my grandma died of cancer, my aunt died of cancer, you know, my nanny died of cancer before I left. There was just so much going on with the guerrillas, you know, before I was born, and there was still stuff going around. You know, my uncle was killed, I think either when I was just a baby or before I was born. He was only 15 years old because he missed his curfew. There was just nothing. I don't really have a lot to say about El Salvador because that's all I remember is just the bad things. Like I remember my aunt getting robbed for shoes. In one of my poems I said, my aunt got robbed today, you know, well, I hope the guy likes women's shoes, you know what I mean? So, I mean, that's just what I remember about El Salvador. There's just, the birthday parties were actually the best though, because I remember all my family, all my friends were there. And the last party I had when I was five, it was like a big going away party for me, because little did I know I was gonna go back. I was gonna go to the United States, and it's sad when I think about it, because I haven't seen my family in 26 years. I once lived in a battered house, built with drunk stones and murky bed sheets, where lightning was the least of my worries, and the arachnid belt stings were but mellow raindrops showering my every fill of discoloration. I used to play with toy guns with real murderers, until the incarceration began and left me alone with only my German Shepherd and my Gallo Emilio to attend to. My first kiss was from a girl with teardrops for lips. Her fragrance was of salt and innocence. It was knitted on her Sunday dress that she wore 4 times a week. I remember seeing clowns but never laughing, watching death, yet never cried. For death wasn't introduced to me just yet, but just another fly in a spider's web that never seemed to move. I remember demons dancing in my crib, shaped like teddy bears without ears, covered in roly-poly skin. In the morning, I would wake up to the smell of gunpowder shit stains scattered in the mist of slum gardens and heavy breathing of one's last crooked smile, buried above the tombstone of their final disappearing act. We had a lot of magicians in El Salvador. They made a lot of people go abracadabra with their machete wands and their disposable firecrackers. No one ever begged for money or clothing. They would just take it and never even say thank you. They would just make the givers beg for what had already belonged to them. Some would cry and yell for help. My aunt was one of them. Most of my people had no manners. Sort of like my neighbors who used to throw their animal skulls over our backyard. Damn litter bugs. They were funny people though. They celebrated Halloween every day. I guess it was like their favorite holiday or something. I used to live with my mother, my nanny, my aunt, and 3 uncles. Though my mom did never come back after I woke up from my nap. I missed her deeply. It's okay though. She came back 5 years later. People asked me who my father was. I simply said, "What's that?" And that was where I once lived.
When I was around 4 years old, my dad was never around. My mother and him had a really volatile relationship, and I can remember there being like a speakeasy. So I would go looking for my dad in the speakeasy, and I remember stepping over hookers and pimps and alcohol and crying out for my dad. He'd be right there, just slumped on the ground. I remember just the pain of having a dad that was so embarrassing. He'd pee on himself, my friends would laugh at me, and I remember being teased about having a dad who was an alcoholic. He was also very abusive to my mother at that time as well. He would come to the house drunk, he would hit her. She'd ask for money for support, he'd hit her, and it came to a fever pitch when she got so upset. She actually tried to murder him, tried to shoot a gun at him through the window of the car with my brother inside. And thank God she missed him. But that's when it really got bad. That's when she really decided to leave. And my mother, we packed up our stuff, we moved to Bethlehem, PA. The saving grace for my mother was that she always nurtured the arts. I can remember her reading Dr. Seuss to me when I was little, and I was always infatuated with the rhyming scheme and character development and movies and things like that. So my mother was the one that really nurtured the artistic vein, if you want to say, in me, and I love her for that. When I was 9 years old, my babysitter molested me, and a lot of people joke around. They say, well, at least it was a woman, it wasn't a guy, but it was very damaging for me because when I was 9 years old, I was ushered into the world of pornography. And that actually set the stage for my later years when I would really delve deeply into pornography to the point where I would sit in the house hours and hours at a time like a recluse. And I would go outside and I would see women, decent women, and I wouldn't know how to react to them. I was withdrawn and I was like kind of strange because I was used to dealing with women that I seen in the movies. I wanted to replicate that lifestyle that I saw in the pornography. And it got really, really bad to the point where I was dating women that weren't my caliber of women to date. They were just, I wanted one thing from them. And it was all about what they can do for me because I saw the movies that portrayed that. So, and as time went on, I got into marijuana with the sex. Everything led back to sex. Because like I said, addiction runs in my family very deep. So is depression. And with that, not having a dad around and trying to self-medicate with pornography and marijuana, I just fell into this abysmal world of pain and addiction. I've always been into poetry since I was very young. Like I said, my mother would nurture that, but it took a back seat to my addiction to pornography and marijuana, and I wasn't doing it at all at a certain point, and I was just out there chasing women, having sex with whatever I could find. The turning point was when I had a friend who I was actually friends with, and he actually contracted AIDS and he died. He wasn't gay. He was sleeping with women. The same thing I was doing, he was doing, but for some reason, God spared me and not him. And that really changed me. I mean, I was a little bit into poetry, but I went full-fledged into it. And I said, there has to be a better way. I don't want to die that way. Years later, with the birth of my son, I wanted to be around to share these things with him. I didn't want to be the dad that died of AIDS. That brought an awareness to me, and it actually scared me straight. Changing my pain and making it into power with the poetry. And at the same time, it also helps me. It heals me, but also helps other people, and that's the gift of it, and that's what I'm very thankful for. One of my biggest, if not the biggest, influences on my life was the late, great Michael Jackson. I actually saw him in concert, the Victory Tour, and I was like in the third row, and I remember he was doing Billie Jean, and he was done with his set, and he yelled out in the audience, "Woo!" and he looked dead at me. Now maybe he wasn't looking at me, but when you're young and that impressionable, in my mind he was looking at me. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt like he spoke to me. He showed me how to be like an artist, with his philanthropy work, his work ethic, and that really taught me a lot. I just didn't understand how someone that beautiful could be so tormented. He was the main one, I think, that kept me on track, despite everything else. My poetry tends to lean more towards spirituality and love, because that's the part of me that wants to heal and help others heal. My music and poetry are very close, like twins. And I think that's what makes my work different than a lot of other traditional artists. Not to put anybody down, but I tend to want to make them interconnected, where it can be either a song or a poem. I have one song where I'm talking about heroin addiction from the perspective of the heroin needle. It's called Hold Me in Your Arms. And in the song, I'm actually playing the heroin needle from the male and female perspective. And it's kind of freaky because in the song, you don't know that I'm actually the woman rapping. But I wanted to hammer in that point of deception that the drug does, because I have experience with that marijuana and how drugs can talk to you and things like that. I want to, lift people's vibrations and lift people's, spirits and, and make them think. When I was younger and I was going through those traumatic events with my dad and my mother, I would always escape into this world of books. For me, poetry is everything. It's love, it's light, it could be conflict, it could be your mother, your father, your God, your spirit, whatever it is, but for me, it's like an escape. It's an escape from wherever I'm at in my head or wherever I don't want to be. I could just become another character and at the same time relay that information to the world and to people, and hopefully they can, take a glimpse into their own soul and, and do some inventory. In the meadows, the fields have grown real thick. Bullet strays make shallow graves get filled quick. Evil ways make hearts black and real sick. No fist fights. Just bats, thugs, and steel picks. We slaves to psychics and horoscopes. Depraved, that's why the pain's so hard to cloak. Can't wash away your shame with no bar soap. Bikes can't speak, but the world turns like a bike spoke. We drink so much brew, our livers get bruised. Shooting up our veins and shooting up the schools. There's cause for alarm in the city that don't snooze, where virgins get worn out more than Forrest's running shoes. Run, Forrest? The truth shines like sun, so it's hard to look. Ain't got a book in your face, but stay on Facebook. This goes out to those with bankrolls. You think 8 O's can save your soul? I don't think so.
I bought a computer from my brother for like $200. And I started on the GarageBand, and I started messing around with the different song kits and guitar and stuff like that on there, and I started putting songs together. I said, well, damn, I can do this by myself. You know, I don't need a band to do it. I don't have to worry about nobody else. It's just got me, myself, and that's it. You know, I don't have to worry about me quitting, me not showing up, me being too drunk, or me being not drunk enough, you know, not being creative enough. It's all on me. It's nobody else. So if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. When I lost the computer I had, I lost my ability to make that music, you know, for a long time. But I had about 7, 8 songs, and I tried to push them on the social internet as much as I could. I did it for about a year. I was really getting into it, you know, and I thought I was getting really good at it, composing and arranging, and also, you know, putting the spoken word in the words to it, and, you know, making actual songs. So I lost that, and I think after about a year and a half, me and a buddy, and I think my brother, saved up about 900 pounds of scrap, brass, copper. I think I got about $550 was my share. Down at the store, got me a $500 laptop. From that point on, I'm up to, I mean, probably 30, 40 songs now, and that was a couple years ago. You know, I don't have a lot of money, never did. I can't go out and build a studio in my apartment. You know, I got a $40 microphone in my dining room and a broken laptop with a broken screen, but I have a monitor, you know, and I just kind of do it like that. And I just keep working every day, harder and harder. I'd be in school, and I had a teacher who was pretty mean. She was pretty rough on me. I was the poor kid in the class, and in that part of town that we lived in, you know, all the kids, you know, were well off, or not rich, but, you know, had what they needed. So I think she picked on me a lot. All the other kids in the class wrote, you know, half a page, just a simple story. And here I come in with 3 pages, wrote this whole story about this ghost that lived out in the woods, and, you know, this and that. I can't remember it all, but it was something like that. It was 3 pages worth, you know, and I was proud of it, you know, and I was like, wow, she's really gonna be impressed, you know, and because here, I went way above what all the other kids were doing, you know, with this story, and I take it up to her, and she just starts yelling at me. She's like, you're so stupid. She said, you can't even read what you're writing. You don't have good penmanship, you know, I can't even read this. She's like, calls this boy over, you know, can you read this? Look at this, you know, and this kid's like, well, yeah, I can read it. She's like, no, I can't read it. She's like, take this up to the front of the class and hold it up there and show everybody how horrible your penmanship is. And this whole time, you know, tears are welling up because I'm just a kid, you know, and I'm like so, you know, angry because I was like, man, you didn't even read the story, you know, I mean, you just looked at the words. So she made me hold this up in front of the whole class, and all the kids were like, you know, oh God, that's, you know, look at that. And I was just like, you know, starting to cry or was gonna punch somebody or something. But it really, really hit me hard because I was so proud of it, you know, and she just embarrassed me in front of the whole kids. If you just read it, you wouldn't care about what the, you know, if I spelled this word right, if I had a comma here, the punctuation. You know, I feel like that about poetry and a lot of things, you know, and I don't have the education that, you know, these professors, all these, you know, Pulitzer Prize winners and this and that have, you know, bachelor's degrees in English, lit, and all this and that, you know, and I think a lot of times I've been kind of banished about my writing because I don't have the education, but instead of, you know, trying to see the story and read it and see it and feel it, they're just worried about that it's not written how a poem should be written. I went into, you know, kind of this flight mode where, you know, she was like, okay, spell this word on the chalkboard, and I didn't know how to spell it. So I was trying to spell it, and the kids were laughing. I think some kids were like, oh, it's so easy. It's easy, you know, and I was just like, I broke the, you know, the whole dramatic broke the chalk and ran out of the room crying. I was gonna fight everybody and, you know, beat everybody up. But, you know, I don't think I wrote for a long time after that. You know, because of that, I was scared to death to put my feelings, myself out there like that. If people were just gonna ridicule me or, you know, belittle me because I didn't have, you know, I wasn't, you know, perfectly educated, you know, with a college degree. I think it's a lot of like that, you know, and today with writing, it's the same kind of thing. Poetry is about you and how you feel and hear it and how people read it, how you read it, how that should make you feel. You know, so I'm never gonna quit writing because poetry is about in your heart, in your soul. That's where it's at. There is beauty in this beacon of the sun. She lingers along the wind through the window, but it's casting no shadow upon my bed. Old crooked door and noisy hinges, still cold morning dew till noon. Drops a few on the front stone below the cottonwood. Lovely chair painted white a long time ago, chipped and rusted and blue underneath where it was once new. I sat for a lifetime in that chair the day you died. I cried on the flowers that you'd plant every spring. I was mad and I was lost and I was angry and I ripped them up. I'll plant them again next chance I get. They will always be there just like the slamming of the screen door. He smiles at me on the way to the bus stop. He runs his hands across the tall grass. I sat and I watched him and I hoped that the bitterness would pass. But it just isn't the same here without you anymore. He gets out of bed around 10, sees me there in the old chair. We sit and we talk about you, our beautiful sunlight. We still love you.
I believe it's vital to break the silence surrounding sexual abuse on many levels. And I feel that if, of course it's completely understandable that many people don't want to talk openly about it, but people who do feel able to, I think it's important to claim it as a thing that happens, that needs to be addressed and needs to be spoken of. There's a ruthless claiming of one's voice and one's life in the face of attempted destruction. There was this persistent and stubborn and sometimes maddening will to live. There's a kind of utterance that emerges from states of extremity. Oh, I should mention, one poet that saved my life in a very real sense was Paul Celan, who survived the Shoah. He committed suicide later in the early 70s. Poetry emerging from that was almost a kind of reflex, you know, it wasn't even a conscious thing really. I think particularly in the abuse I went through, I was in a state of death for a long time. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't remember anything in a sort of linear form. I remember emerging from that time. That was the first time when I really took poetry seriously, the reading and eventually the writing of it very seriously, as a matter of life and death, which it was in many ways. My boy of the red feathers, my boy on your dark warpath, through the woods and dusk, skin of stray cats, footfalls of the hunting dog, brave boy, the best beloved, holding your knife, holding the sky, drop down where you shot it, with your arrows of bamboo, with your laugh, my flute of bone.
I went into a severe depression because the only choice I had was to be angry. There was a market for angry poems written by black artists. I found 100 envelopes with 100 stamps, and any celebrity I could find, I would mail these poems on giant posters to these celebrities. So I said, somebody is going to read my poetry. And out of 100, 3 or 4 wrote back. But the one that I remember the most was Gwendolyn Brooks, the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. She wrote a letter. And at that time, she criticized my work. So I was kind of arrogant. She took her red pen, and I thought this was a perfect poem. And she said, well, the rhyme is off. And I was thinking, the nerve of this woman. Who is this woman telling me my rhymes are off? And she wrote a second letter. And she began to get very bossy and grouchy. And to me, it was like a tennis game. I was so depressed. I didn't know. We were just hitting the ball back. And she was 80 at the time. And she, at that time, she wanted to live. And I didn't. I was 30. And I really, at that time, didn't really care. So I was going through a difficult time. But in the end, she wrote a final letter to me. And that letter will haunt me because she said, "You're only 32. You have plenty of time to be great." And so I kept these letters, and a few years later, I said, let me find out who Gwendolyn Brooks really is, a woman with a high school named after her and so many honorary doctorate degrees. And it just became, the words that she left me were haunting. It was almost like she was passing something to me. And she told me, "My life is almost over now." She said, "I could help you with your book, but I only have the time for one more book. And if I help you with your book, I couldn't do mine." She says, "You already know you're going to be a great writer." And she said, "And when you're 83, you'll understand." And then she passed away a few years later. And at that time, I was still coming out of a depression. And I realized, wow, was I just visited by a woman with this background. So that will inspire me forever. The colors of the coffins. Miss Althea Johnson, I'm Officer Howard of the police station. Your son, ma'am, Rudy Johnson, was killed 30 minutes ago. Children taking their last breath at 9. I wish some of these deaths had a pause or a rewind. I wish the hearse could drive in reverse. I wish the youth could escape this curse. Why does good always have to turn to worse? Why do the guns burst? I wish these mothers could take these flowers back to the florist. Heavenly Father, this drug life ain't for us. Rudy needed $200 to help his mama keep lights. Ray Ray said he knew a way that he could make $1,000 in one night. Took Rudy 3 hours to sell the weed, had $1,000 in each shoe. But Ray Ray forgot to tell him about Day Day. His mama needed lights too. Ray Ray refused to give him the money, so Day Day killed him in the park. And now both of their mothers are living in the dark. I think about it, and I think about it often. But mostly, I think about the colors of the coffins. Red, green, yellow, and blue. Dead teens of every hue. And if you're not careful, there's a black one waiting for you. Blood is a-pouring in these streets, Lord. Children is dying like lambs in the slaughter. Lord, give us the strength today. Help every son, help every daughter. Sheila used to sell seashells by the seashore. Now she sells herself by the corner store. When she was 15, her mama showed her the door. They used to tell her she looked like Beyonce, but all the tears, all the years took her beauty away, and now her hair stinks and her clothes are never clean. I asked her if she was 50. She said, "No, sir, I'm only 19. I handed her $2. She said, "Sir, I could give you sex." I said, "No, God loves you, and I can give you respect." 2 weeks later, I read the headlines, 19-year-old prostitute stabbed in the neck. I think about it, and I think about it often, but mostly I think about the colors of the coffins. Red, green, yellow, and blue, dead teens of every hue. And if you're not careful, there's a black one for you. The doctor told Tyrone he had liver disease. Too much vodka, too much gin, too much scotch. He told the doctor he would never drink again. Asked the doctor when he could go home. The doctor said, "Sorry, son, you're not." I think about it, and I think about it often. But mostly, I think about the colors of the coffins. Red, green, yellow, and blue. Dead teens of every hue. And if you don't change today, there's a black one just for you.
Lost generation, heed the conversation. We are in the midst of a deep situation.
drug infiltration, thug infiltration, God's condemnation that's told through revelations, the loss of patience, the cost of innovation, fear, intimidation, nuclear proliferation, recession got us hating, the working class is scraping. Meanwhile, the government still telling us be patient, but how can we wait when our job market's vacant and misappropriation of funds is so blatant? Broken hearts, broken dreams, screams cause we aching. Smoke screens, dope fiends peeing on the pavement. You won't discover the truth if you ain't got the clues. It ain't about gang colors, man, we all get the blues. If what they call you sticks, remove those tattoos, man. Is you trying to wake up from the signs or hitting snooze?
I actually got into a game when I was 16 years old. I was really depressed, you know, I wasn't really into like anything except just stay in my room. That was my life, just watching TV. I was always alone. My mom would be working, she'd be in the other room, but to me it was like no one was ever home. I just smoked a lot of weed and I was happy there, you know, that's my medicine, but yet I was still alone. And finally when, like I said, when I was 16, I started experimenting with gangs and it didn't really, I wasn't expecting it to be the way it did because I was just thinking it's just a bunch of people just acting cool. Didn't really think about putting in work. You know what I mean? You know, having to go rough up other people and, you know what I mean? I can't even tell you the things, you know, that I saw, but it's funny because when people look at me, they see a Latino, so which Mexican gang are you from? Like, first of all, I'm not Mexican, I'm Salvadorian, you know? And they were just like, what? Like, so what do you bang? Like, what? I was like, I bang with Asians. They're like, what? And I was like, yeah, I bang with Asians. They're like, why? I'm all, because, you know, most of the homies that I knew, all they did was go in and out of jail. They drank a lot, they just, you know, sit in the porches drinking 40s, walking around with the same old clothes every day. And I would see these guys pull up in nice cars, you know, they go out to restaurants and just sell all kinds of like drugs and get free weed. And I wanted free weed, you know, I wanted some bomb shit. Like, you know, I wanted to get high every day for free, you know, and it actually was like that. One of the leaders, what we called a die-low, and a die-low was actually our head. It was his birthday party. So we went there, we went to a restaurant, and there was a whole bunch of just, as soon as you walk in the door, first it was actually, you walk into the restaurant and it's just a couple people. So I'm thinking, where's these gangsters at, you know? And next thing you know, there's like this little private room, and as soon as you open up that private room, there was just a bunch of cloud of smoke. There's maybe, at least, no joking, there was probably like at least 100 gangsters in that just one room. I remember just shaking the die-low's hands and showing my respects, paying my respects. You know, we're getting free food, you know, we're getting free drinks. And I remember because I bought this really nice Nautica shirt and I was all stoked about wearing it. And next thing you know it, they're like, here, come to the back, come to the back. And next thing you know it, I just see one of the homies just turn around and just goes, boom! He just clips me, and it's a good thing I ducked because he hit me from behind the head. And that's where I got jumped into again. I got jumped in a Chinese restaurant. So I was kind of bummed, but at the same time I was excited and I felt like, man, this is it. Like, it's a new life for me, you know? I got accepted, you know? And everything was cool, you know, they gave me responsibilities like, here, sell this, sell that. So I was selling weed at school. I was one of the most popular kids in school, but by popularity, it wasn't like because of who I was, it's because I grew up, you know, in Temple City for many years, since I was 7. Temple City is not known to be a gang-affiliated neighborhood. Next thing you know what, the Asians were taking over, and I remember this once that Asian boy got shot dead at some pool hall in San Gabriel, I believe. We started rivaling with all these other gangs, and they were all, you know, we were so prideful at that time. Here I am, 16 years old, and I'm running around with these guys, and they're over here jumping people, and I had to recruit people, and I was doing what they were doing, but most of them did more stuff than I did, you know, because obviously I was new to it, you know. They've been around for years. I don't think I was ready for that. I wasn't ready for it, not because I was scared, you know. Murder to me it was nothing, because I know what hate is. I know that feeling when people say, oh, how can people murder people? It's like, you can't really say that because you were never in their shoes. You know, it's not like I had like this bloodthirst, you know, where I just want to go kill people. I had an anger issue where if people got me mad, then don't fucking get near me and don't fuck with me at all. Because I don't like that. I don't like people touching me. I don't like people looking at me. And most of all, it all started because my mom would push me into her church. And she would force me and she'd go, come to church. And I would just hate going to church. And I think that's when I started hating God. and my hate just ignited. And so when I became more into the gangs, I started caring less about things that I did. I remember I had a very special spiritual experience, if I should say. It all started really when one of my best friends that I was in a gang with, he got locked up for murder when he was 17. A lot of people were questioning me, were you there, this and that? And like, even if I was, am I gonna tell you? But I actually wasn't there, so I mean, thank God, you know, because I couldn't imagine myself being locked up for 35 to life like my friend, you know. During that time, you know, it was weird because before that actually happened, I actually told God, because what happened was one of my mom's best friends came to the house one day. She's like, my mom was like, hi, you know, how you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm good. She's like, oh, so what brings you to the neighborhood? And she was like, I came for Orlando. My mom looked at her, Orlando, why are you here for him? She's like, yeah, the reason why I came is because the Lord brought me here. And I looked at her like, okay, whatever. She said, yeah, the Lord knows that you've been going through some stuff, you know, some things, and you know, he just wants you to know that, you know, he's there for you and he wants to help you. And it's funny because before she even came, I even prayed. I said, God, if you're for real, if you want me to serve you, get me out of the gangs. I went to Calvary Chapel in Pasadena. Ever since that, you know, that day, I went to church and I got saved. I would still get persecuted with gangs from other sets, thinking that I was still part of the gang. In reality, they didn't know that I started going to church. I was actually trying to better my life. Little did I know, I went home and I prayed and I said, God, like, you know, help me, you know, like, I'm trying to be good. I'm not trying to, you know, act up. Because before, if you would even just come up to me, I would just hit you. You know what I mean? I would just hit you like in class. I'd be in class and then someone can just bump into my table and I turn around and say something and he'll say something back and he'll just get it across his face. I started really getting into the Bible, and I remember reading scriptures, and I remember one of the scriptures would say that hypocrites are worse than sinners. I think it all started in freshman year of high school. I used to have this teacher named Mrs. Reynolds. When she would read poetry, she would go, who wants to read next? And then I remember doing it for the first time, and then she would go, she would just do that little face, and every time when she brought out poetry, she always wanted me to read it. And it was funny because during those times I was depressed a lot. I think my depression started when I was in junior high, and it caught up to me in high school even more. I was never really a ladies' man because I was always the nice guy. Hi, how you doing? Like, you know, like a little bitch. Like, if I'm just say so myself, because I'm just keeping it real. You know, I was a softie. When I used to have crushes, I remember one of my best friends I actually had a crush on, and she actually gave me my first poem. She brought it out of me, and I remember going home and putting on Faith Evans, and you know, as soon as I get home, and then I would listen to all these R&B jams, and I would just put the speakers by my ear, and then I would just think of her, and next thing you know it, I would just start writing poetry about love. And in spite of my dark, full life, if dark full is even a word, all I talked about was love. I never really talked about, I'm gonna fucking kill you, I'm gonna fucking rip your heart out, you fucking stomped on me, you crazy bitch, you fuck. I was just all about love, you know? And it was crazy because ever since that I've always loved poetry and I never stopped writing it. And I told myself that one day I'm gonna write a book, and I did. One of my biggest goals in life was to bring that book to my English teacher, Mrs. Reynolds. Little did I know, when I got there and I was already talking about my book and I was excited about it, I found out that she was murdered by her ex-husband. I put her in my book, obviously, you know, dedicated to her and one of my closest friends, Travis Lockey, who actually committed suicide. Poetry has helped me so much. God has really blessed me with that desire. As much as I hate, and I use that word strongly because it's so true, I hate that I'm so fucking good-hearted, you know what I mean? And I don't say that boastfully, but sometimes I just can't say no to people sometimes, you know. I wish I could, but it's just not in me. And I think that's what makes me a decent writer, because I keep so much stuff in and I have so much passion in me that when I write, it has to be either passion written or not written at all. And lately I've been flaking on it because my son's born now. He's my new poetry. He's my favorite poem ever created. That's my only concern now. It's just my future now and where I'm going with not just poetry, but as a father now. I never thought I was gonna have kids. I never had a dad, so being in his life means everything to me. And poetry is never gonna go anywhere, you know. But my son, you know, God forbid anything happens to him, because I know that I will always have poetry, but my son's not promised to me, you know. And I say that not to, you know, put a curse or anything like that. It's just because of all the shit that I've experienced and I've seen people getting taken out and, you know, and no longer with us, and I get scared. That's like my biggest fear, is losing my son. Before I had him, I still this day I have depression. I suffer from depression. I get anxiety attacks sometimes, and I remember before I had nothing to live for, and I tried taking my life, and for some reason God still kept me here on earth. I don't know why. I'm hoping to see something good come out of it, and something great came out of it, and that was my beautiful baby boy lyric. And sometimes life still gets to me.
I never knew that your body would just cling to me. It got me so drunk in love, I start mumbling my speech. You're the type of star I never thought that I would one day reach. You got me fitted with your love, that's why I call you unique. You're like a sweater that I wear that was knitted with love. I gotta give thanks to your parents and the Lord from above. The first 5 letters in your name spell the word angel out. I know you're not from heaven, but sometimes have my doubts. You're incredible, how beautiful you are, unique. I love you, you're the goddess from no mythology Greek. You got me spinning like a bottle every time that we kiss. One day I'll have people call you by Mrs., not Miss. You're the planet near the nebulas that the galaxies keep. I never thought that in a million light years my love could ever be this deep. Deep, so deep that my heart pops right out when you speak. You're more precious than gold, that's why I call you unique. You make the heavens blush with eternal smiles. You are the reason why space is breathless for infinite miles. Sweetheart, come lay with me. I'll be your peaceful slumber. I'll cover you like rain, ease your fears when you hear that thunder. So glad you're all mine. My soul divine will make them pretty babies. When you and I combine, you take me higher than any space could try to match. You're more than just some fish in the sea. You're the perfect catch. My precious lovey-dovey, more than some cuddy-buddy. You are my everything, like a crown, girl, I place above me. Who needs to see the world when you are my universe? I never knew that love could be such a beautiful curse. My firefly that lights up nightly skies. You leave me mesmerized with sighs, Oh, unique, magnifique, ma chérie amour, bon appetit, my treat. I leap for joy. Mi amor, aquí estoy. Let's do all the things that you enjoy. Come hang with your boy. I want to take you to a different world of fantasies. Lay you gently on the sand as we fulfill our needs, then just kiss you from your head to your feet. You're more precious than gold. That's why I call you unique.
So you think I have forgotten that late night a long time ago in that scummy place? On your office couch reading scripts while you sat there licking your lips? I was only 16 years old and scared. I was lost even though I was prepared. Like a deer in the headlights, I sat so still while you pretended that I was perfect. For the movie with that Napoleon idiot, short guy with millions, a home in Malibu. What a miserable little freaky misfit. I knew that it was too late to meet you, but I went anyway, like all the girls do. Even though you were old and full of shit, I was determined to play and outsmart you. So I sat there and read all of my lines, like a tangled puppet with lipstick on. Tight clothes and in my prime, I turned you on, but I was paralyzed by a desperate ego and my need for the prize. Praying that you would sort of be nice, but when you weren't, I didn't think twice. I let down my long hair and blew out a sigh. I gave you that look, straight in your eyes. I knew that this could never be paradise. You would never ever see me twice. So I stood up with my pissed off starlet pose, high heels, tight skirt, and sheer black pantyhose. I said words that you never wanted to hear. You never had me, or even punctured my soul. Nothing you had could make me part of your show. Fucking you would be like killing a baby deer. You can dream of it until your final years.
Can I lay my pillow in the sky? This continual conversation, a dead end lie. 7 times the pedestal. Who are we? And parcels full of harmony and a fade into me. Every time I wanna hold you in my arms, like eating dough.